the, okay. So, I have to get rid of that. We need the practice of morality, and then in order to practice morality, then we need to engage in the gradual process of listening to teachings, reflecting on the meaning, and meditating. No.
All this gene, because the share, but it's not the Kasang on the Chudum Gordi, here tower, Chudum, that Chudum songs at the two Chudum songs are the Pena Chudum dan Dombani Chiguacheri, Dombas are the Migivicho Kawatalam Dombasigio, Dombasigio. Any things that Chudum songs and Chudum Karsungre Samea, grounds of some natural degree. Chudum songs are the Pena Chidam Chudum Gelonda Gitula and Chingi Java Mango, you are the Indian around the Chiung me Geshe by Yena. When a social Shiela Nurse Poma, Shiela Soju Samba Poma, this Chudum song. Watana, him at the Shiela, Dream Mandu Samba Kunuchi Leni, Dream Share was some Samluna, or that Dream Digmare, Dream the Awomaris and the Samleton Dream Part, Share Kawatella, Chudum song as well. Today, not a Migi Jane, Naga Rene. Ting Pana Ting Yambala, Shena Ting Yambala. Today in the social summon and a cartoon sabatella to do so as well. So that to do not rene swing your to get the Samalo any Page Mambala, to do so you do somebody, so a Samlo Digi, Yawachima Penjala, and then had a mig combat and good not to your. He is up to do so what this Saturday.
Now, I mentioned that when we speak of morality, or as this text puts it, the ethical discipline. So this means the same as dompa, or like vows. And so when we talk about vow, it has the idea. Actually, it's more like literally some kind of restraint. So what it means is you're restraining yourself. Binding yourself from the sort of the side of non-virtue, and so practicing morality means doing that. So now, when we talk about the practice of morality, it is true that we have the huge number of rules that are followed by the fully ordained monks and nuns, but otherwise, in general, then practicing morality would refer to stopping oneself from harming others, stopping oneself from having the wish to harm others. So, for example, in the case of lying, maybe you feel yourself on the verge of lying to somebody, and then you think to yourself, "No, this is not right. I mustn't do that." And so you restrain yourself from lying by recognizing that it's wrong. And this is something that can be understood in relation to all the 10 non-virtues. And so, like, for example, you might feel yourself tending to say something unpleasant to somebody. And then you think, no, that's not right. I mustn't do that. And you stop yourself from doing it. So that would be morality. And so the practice of morality can be understood in relation to all the 10 non-virtues. So it's a general thing that applies to all of us, and would acting in that way would become a cause, or would act as a cause for being born in future as a human being or as a god. No. What the great Indian master Chandra Kirti says in his text, Madhyamakavatara, he says that there's no other cause for achieving birth of high status, which means birth as a human being or as a god, than the practice of morality. And what he means is that it's the main cause. Practicing morality is the principal cause for achieving such a birth. No.
소소 미절 하만들라 가리요바 이나야 디게디 아니 버게 롱종 제제 아니 딱 간다라 슝딱 가르소레 슝디게디마 쳐바쳐바 삼바쳐바 고바치고 그래 스틸 롱종 제네 버게 저성 고송디 다 냠레스네 민도 저성 고송이야 다 롱종 치고리 소디 숭고다.
No. Then the text goes on to talk about whether just practicing morality is enough. So the author makes the point that in practicing morality, of course, is very important, but on top of that, for the time that we have left in this life, it's really important to study the really, authentic, important texts, to reflect on their meaning, and then to meditate upon what one has understood.
다 직제된 게 마슈빈다와 төсөм 제베 강사들 딱 가장 쯤에 주름 쉬어로 쉬어 이거든요. 다 төсөм 제베 강사들 시저드베 롱주진 머리세베 드미진 도와 젬베 람주진 취규구이 사베진 төсөм라 메답 미다테 소디송가.
No.
직제 지금 가고 되는
No. So as far as this commentary by Geshe Drapa Gyaltsen is concerned, we've already covered verse 7 last time. And so now we're on verse 8 and going halfway through verse 9. So he who engages in study and reflection is enriched by resources that enhance knowledge, is endowed with the light that dispels ignorance, and is familiar with the road to guide sentient beings. They're endowed with the seed of the Dharmakaya. So you cannot succeed without study and reflection. No.
양조마 세버스요이나 아니 표선 제바이나 와 소소의 슝을야다 남배게 따도 때문에 슝망고 요리 슝디게 되는 소소 로준 제바이나 얘는 랑게 미시버 사바 망고 시위지 시윤거리 와 시자주별 시제 남다 망고 시위지 아니 시윤거리 딘데겠다 먼저 마서니 유초고 차원의 시제 남자 망고시 시베게 롱주지 시자주별 롱주지에서 어디서.
So there when it says enriched by resources that enhance knowledge, what that means is that when you go about learning these great texts that explain the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha's worldview kind of thing, then you'll come to know so many things that you didn't know about before. And so this is like it's like that makes you rich in understanding, rich in knowledge. No.
대가는시 마리스의 드미진, 와, 등을 소속 시제내라 미시베게 톰 내가 민바지요와, 어디게 대파 세주고 tö바치야만 현지단에 아니 tö바치야바에는 소소 등을 미시베게 민바다오지는 디파 세주고 예스 마리스의 드미진, 드미파는시.
No, then it says that he's endowed with the light that dispels ignorance. So when we don't understand things, when we have that kind of ignorance, confusion, then when you learn and reflect, then that knowledge is like a light or a lamp that dispels that the darks of that ignorance.
타바다 탐제체만 로야가 남디게디 다 소소기는 랑가도 무슨 유유와제 좋아 진짜 차도리스 좋아 니시 랑기 시윤데 삼바 시연이야 진짜게 타바도 탐지 좀 도버시가 남게 좀 받대야래 소소이네 야 타바도 탐지 좀 도야가 남게 좀 그게 젠도야게 랑가도 맞는 랑가 주인을 잡고 차도 남기
No. And then it says he's familiar with the road to guide sentient beings. So what that means is you'll gain this knowledge that of the how the path, how to follow the path that leads to liberation and enlightenment. And because you know about that path, then you'll be able to explain to others. You'll be able to show that path, that road to others. No.
그냥 뒤로와 지난도 지난 기겐 칭에들이 먹고 요래 지난도 강한 기겐 칭에들이 강부 소스 신기요 말이 신나겠다는 소소로 좀장 아니 니 장마 시험받이 마음만을 루주 신다리야 아니 소소기 남된시야 편도인 것도 와 기능시 저바 제외 같은 다데 남도 슝치모 디게 인터도 디게 소소 신인데 남내체 디돈 신다리야 그냥 아니 이 책이 어디 숨어
What this is saying is, like, for example, there are some of you already who are teaching. So how did that happen? At first, you didn't know, did you? Then you learned, you studied, and you came to understand things. And then that knowledge gave you the ability to explain others, to show the way that you've understood. No.
대담도 마세베 진대게 표바 제베게 삼려나 바자야고 셔그리 바자디 마음바나 아니 먼저 산지제 공방 토베야게 유당 사변스네 지지구이 사변지 남긴 토베야게 사변차도
It's not just that either. Through listening to the teachings, you build up these imprints, and those imprints are like the seed that will enable you to achieve the Dharmakaya, the body of truth, the wisdom and so forth of the Buddha in the future, of an enlightened being in the future. No. And for this reason, looking at the second line of verse 9, in order to achieve enlightenment, then listening to the teachings, studying the teachings, and reflecting on their meaning is indispensable. No.
맞체들 개바 체거리 개바 차서 나게다 침부 체거리 사게 뭐미지 디나는 양치 신다게 말이야 지구로 용거리 나는 벤주 lonju 용거리 선배 트디 코네치도 저바 제바이나 디지그 말이 숨고.
And then he says that so this is how on the foundation of practicing morality, then you engage in listening and reflecting, and there are all these wonderful things that will follow as a result of that. However, he now tells us, if you're listening to the teachings, studying, and then reflecting on the meaning is just for this life, only for this life, like thinking, oh, if I do this, then I'm going to become a really great scholar and people are going to respect me, I'll become wealthy and popular and so forth, then that's a huge mistake. That really doesn't work. No.
양 저섬 내가 차도 제스데 양 소소에 저바 삼바칭에 야가든데 용거리 디 너들이야 차도 제바 봐 저섬 교 징에도 통중제하다 저섬 소소에 야가 징에도 차도 제하다 저섬 매라 제바 저섬 내가 차도 어떤 이제 제는 지금 말에 수수 퇴선 지단이 이제 지주요 말에서
If you're only doing this for the sake of this life, then that will act as a cause for developing pride. You'll also tend to look down upon those who are not as learned as you, who haven't done as much listening and reflecting. Those people who are better than you, you'll be jealous of them. So none of this is any good, is it? No.
나에게 나제 주변 주제에서 소소 퇴섬전에 탈라 전부터 시험받에 당의 시기 유sam에 나제 지야다. 어떻든지 요 말이스 어디서
So he mentions it provides the resources that produce conceit. So it's like this. Conceit is the same as pride. Anyway, that's how I'm translating it. Pride. That's how we translate it. So all of that listening and reflecting, it will become resources that bring about pride, and that's it. And then also it will make you look down on those who are not as good as you, and you'll be jealous of those who are better than you. No.
코다 롱지 초와지 년주주의 자와지 퇴섬지 취지지 퇴섬 쉬어서 다디 제가 코다 롱지 초와지 단예 퇴바 야고 제바는 남 체들 야고 시에 나로 코로 망고 용구리 있으면 담로다 나로 뭐 그게 야고 용구리 있으면 롱지 전부 체를 있으면 코다 롱지 초와지 어딘데 제바이나 체 디코네체도 데 삼로간 디 제바인 디니 마오만은 년주 주줘야
And then in verse 10, he carries on and says, it causes you to seek retinues and wealth. It's the root that brings forth lower transmigrations. So what he's saying is that when you're only learning and reflecting, studying, reflecting just for this life, then you'll be thinking about the followers that you're going to have. You'll be thinking, if I do this, then I'm going to have lots of followers. I'm going to get lots of offerings. When I get lots of offerings, that's going to make me wealthy. And thinking in that way, then it's going to bring nothing but birth in future in the lower realms. No.
di konechido masonwa kewa chima penjechido samlo tang toba jikore di mayimba jidin chuje jigu ondo son interesam chebaina di jema je ke yo mar pa sha shu so this one just chuje di tesam sholo shos.
So cast aside study and reflection driven by the 8 concerns. In other words, just for this life means your study and your reflection will be only with the 8 worldly concerns in mind. So without question, this is something that you should cast aside. No. Now, in that way, he's talked about learning and reflection. And then next, he's going to talk about meditation. No.
Di danda jibe chabaji de song dinala gomba gibe khansa quiz nimo poe nimo chance odison wa gomba gibe khansa quiz nimo poe nimo chance porque disungure gom some gomba chabala and gomja wa ta gomja la na to tijibe tingi zige gomja dan chigiyore 디마이마야 제베톤에 삼려는 제바만 붙이는 공자단이요. 봐. 나 근데 가양 제바 있는 근데 집에 띵인지기 돈에 공자바이나 딜래야 약수디 신의 두바잖아. 이 약수리스.
디니긴 안에 아니데 신의 줘야지 약수리스. 라라.
집에 띵인지 봐. 공자야죠. 공자들 리니 거다. 셈치드네 그게 공자단 찍다. 나 삼려는 제바만 붙이네. 디체는 가린 제바 먹고치는 곰자다 니 봐.
Yes,
근데 얘는 뜻집에 띵인 되게 곰자다 이거는 냠내 제니 아니 신의 주투야를 배주셔야 돼 개체 못 있어.
yes. So then after that in verse 11 it says all who undertake meditative practices are endowed with the antidote to the affliction. So as I mentioned before, we have this threefold process of listening to the teachings, reflecting on the meaning, and then meditating. So now he's talking about meditation. And as far as meditation is concerned, there are two principal types. You've got one type which is where you're training in your ability to remain one-pointed on a chosen object. The other kind involves lots of analysis. And of those two, the first one is extremely useful for being able to achieve that very high level of concentration, which we call calm abiding. No.
곰견이 아주 가르치고 그래서는 곰견이 나라도 심규게 니모디 빵고요 와. 뭐 빵고요리 니모 빵라 개치시 신이 그 안에 심지지도 내내 니모 빵야 돼. 와 니모 빵야 돼. 제가 니모 빵에 니모진 곰견이 신의주바 디게 니모 빵야기 니모 차도 그리스. 이 신의주바 디게 칼람 타벨람 주야기 자와야 차도 그리스. 칼람 주베 자와지. 아니 다 간다 지주 잡아제서 송들라 링이 것도 단다 디식되나 네루토베 롱주체스 네루토베 롱주체 쯤집에 띵게 되게 신내도 유나 마음번에 타바야 도토고리 사면도 네루토베 롱주 네루토베 교양 도토고리스 엔 텔라테니 산제 콤바토야게 교양 도토고리 산제 주베 사본지 콤발라 메타데 제도 곰디 메드미로아지리스
This the Thomas the 지난전에 the
곰자고레스
공격을
곰자니 신에도 와 신에디 아니 니모 뽀야게 님볼 도고 다 모든 곰자가 돈다닌 거지 니모 뽀야 제대로 와 와 니모 뽀라 신에디 냐버도 개치모리 와 제가 곰자니 신에도니 신에디 니모 뽀야게 님보도 차도 this.
Through meditating, when we achieve calm abiding, then that calm abiding acts as the antidote to the mental afflictions. No.
탈람 주베 자와지. 인제게 심지 집에게 띵인지도 야고요나 네게 마음바 타바토야기 주양도 그리스.
And then it says they possess the root of the path to liberation. So that means that likewise, when you went through your meditation, through practicing meditation, you achieve calm abiding, then that is also going to act. That would also be the root of in the future achieving liberation. No.
동반이 또야기 줄래야 그거리 심지집에 띵이들이 하고이나 리더네 동반이 또야기 줄래 그거리
And it also that one-pointedness in your concentration will help you to in other words will act as a cause for you to be able to achieve the insight into the actual ultimate way of being of things. No. And it will be a cause for you to achieve, the state of Buddha. No. For that reason, meditation is also indispensable. So that's all the wonderful things that come from meditation. But now he makes the same point a similar point to the one that he was making before, which is if your meditation is just for the sake of this life, then that's not going to work. That's not good at all. No.
그래서 니나 찌딜라미네 곰바디 엠버 데잔 듀지젠 론담마 카드엔젠 표섬체라 고아젠 스티송도와 제가
No.
찌디 치도 삼로타니 에 곰견의 대바이나 당도 뭐 엠버 데잔 네 엠버 딘데젤라 대바이나 양 아니 거기 디송도와 네 엠버 젤라 리주젤라 되는 곰자가 그치아바 이나야 세치마 교와치마 편지게 삼로지 메나 아니 디지데 취제 용어도 송거지 있다. 라치디 뉴엠바데 셈라 지데 취제 삼로 망보시다는 뒤지 망보 뒤지스나 디시그와 엠버 데죠 뒤지체스 니 망보 코로야기 인 디차도 우리스.
Okay, so then he goes on to say, so you cannot do without meditative practice. We've just done that. So then, when it's just for this life, as for meditative practice pursued for this life's sake, so just for this life, when you're meditating just for this life, he says it brings distractions when residing in solitude. So, in other words, when you're only thinking of this life, and your meditation is just for that, then even if you go to a place of solitude, if you go to like a hermitage, where it says it brings distractions, what that means is that you'll have all sorts of people like coming around you. No.
론담마의 컨디션스, 와, 론담마의 컨디션스야 디송도와 쌤그 딩네 삼바타바네 교와치마 편지가 삼로 매바 아니 딘데 지금 곰자비 쿠유자바 제바이나 와 딘데 코스 다 쌤 딩네 디 매바 인수 산에 바로 바신 유자라 아니 계제신데야 론담마의 컨디션 와 아니 조선 지야라 고아제 와 오늘 전에 곰퓨터하고 저기 딘데야 아니 고아다바다 아 딘데 제가 지금 말해서 어디 쓴 거
it makes you adept in the art of empty chatter. So again, when you're not really sincerely meditating with the idea of something beyond this life in mind, then during the breaks, you'll spend your time just chatting with people. And then you'll criticize people who instead of meditating, they're studying and reflecting. No.
So gom jagi yube kuiche mi shenda ge toba da samba chiuna ko toba da samba chiuna ko to gom jagi yo ma nga shibuji gom jagi yu dondo ge jela kurwa che so disiwata.
So the thing is that so you're not your own meditation isn't sincere. So it's like you're kind of putting on a facade of meditating and then criticizing other people who are not meditating, but like studying and spending their time studying and reflecting. So you end up criticizing them. No. And then with people that really are meditating well, then you'll be jealous of them. And your meditation, anyway, your like show of meditation will be nothing but distraction. And so this will be meditation which is mixed with the 8 worldly dharmas, and it would be better not to do meditation which is mixed with the 8 worldly dharmas, he says. So better give it up, he says.
지진 취지 정원도 제베니 곰디 잡기요 말이에요. 다디 숨겨.
The essence of this is that we do need to meditate with with the view to overcoming the mental afflictions, not with thoughts of the eight worldly dharmas. No.
어도서래. 다디 디 엔답디 단다 셴바 시드는 시간 당보 찌딜의 셴은 처바 민사 시간 디게 전다 찌딜의 셴은 처바 말이 찌딜의 마신바치 고리 처바 야고치 지고리 처바 제단디 수준송 송에 때는 처바다 삼바다 공바디게 냠len 지고리에서 시간 당보 전다도 많이 되시고요.
Up to here, we've been looking at the first of the four the part when we talk about the four parting from the four attachments. So the one which says, if there's clinging to this life, then it's not dharma. So what this has been explaining is that that line, and what it's been saying is that. Of course, making the point that if what you're doing is only for the sake of this life, it's not dharma. So what you should be doing is, instead of just thinking of this life, spend your time practicing morality, and then on the foundation of the practice of morality, then engage in listening, reflecting, and meditating.
남존 남존 나라 년중시에요 봐. 지동아 배가 남존 남존 년중시에요. 년중들라 아니 쳇들라 셰베게 아니 셴바 도과야. 지당 겨와 치면 당신 도과야. 니송어리 이당 년중 거디 쳇들라 셰베 아니 셴바 도과당게 아니 거디 숨겨. 남존 지나. 남존 지나 데리 엔테가난시 가서 냐메 타볼라지기 송나라 melom shior slaimba lo cheso doa shos the melom shior ba melom shina ne tangbo de lo cheso doa sa de wo chi lo cheso doa de dibo do nyamle de ya ko cheba yin so samlo de chelo pa lo tugu lo cheso doa ba ganen shin lamri chembyo nala jibu chung jibu ding jibu chembyo ge nyamle rimba sung yore yinani dibo do jibu chung ge lamji rimba de sheo
no
ge de dina de
No. And so what this means then, since we've been talking about the first of the four, what it means is that if we make the comparison with the three principal paths, so the first of the three is renunciation, and the way that Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa explains renunciation in that text, the three principal paths, is he talks about how to overcome the attachment to the appearances of this life, and then how to overcome attachment to the appearance of future lives. So what we've been looking at so far is to do with, is the equivalent to, it's the same as Rinpoche's teaching on how to overcome the attachment to the appearances of this life. And then in terms of Gampopa's prayers, four prayers, the peerless physician of Dagpo, so Gampopa, his four prayers, of which the first is to be for the mind to go to the Dharma, go into the Dharma. And so this is what we've been doing so far is equivalent to that, because what it means is that when you follow this kind of advice, when you practice in this way, the way that is explained in that first line and in this commentary to that first line, then your mind will go into the Dharma. And then in terms of the great exposition of the stages of path, there you have the practices in common with the person of small capability, middling capability, and then the practices of person of great capability. So what we've been looking at so far is the same as the stage of the path in common with the person of small capability. No.
visongwa yang deba dubala kamsum ji shenba panya cel ta chigan niba digama shi jingwa ta
No. And so now we move on to the second of the four of those four lines, which says if there is attachment to samsara, cyclic existence, then that's not renunciation, or there's no renunciation. And so as far as Jizundrapa Gyaltsen's commentary is concerned, we're looking at verse 14, where it says, to seek nirvana, the state beyond sorrow, relinquish clinging to the three realms. No.
ta dinane chigan thambo nyangen deba dubala nyangen saati disongyore nyangen saati chidang nyemo go mingjao chi nyemo le ya nyangen sa wa ta ngado namju ming ta ta de la jevi ming dul ta ba ta ju ming jebu ta ta de ma bo namju shuna de songyo wa ni inda thanda di jevi ming di dul ta ba ka nyemo la tene ngado nyangen nyangen sen ta dungye sigor wa nyemo la tene dungye yungyo wa 제가 디인스탄에 아니 가리고 유니모텔라 제부 동행 민탄 양에스 그 대바 스데스마 니모 포알라스 니모 포알 두발라스 니모 파야 제도 양에 대바 두발라스야 양에 대바디 타바샤 아니 디 깔레 베즈데 제베고 두발라스
And so it starts off by saying to seek nirvana, the state beyond sorrow. So actually, yeah, so nirvana is the Sanskrit word, which in English means beyond sorrow, beyond sorrow. So here, sorrow, what it actually refers to is the mental afflictions. So now how that works is that, first of all, keep in mind that the mental afflictions are the cause of sorrow, right? So we often find instances where the name of the cause is used to refer to the result. And then there are instances where the name of the result is used to refer to the cause. So here, by referring to the mental afflictions by the term sorrow, that means that that the name of the result, sorrow, is being used to refer to the mental afflictions, which are the cause of that sorrow. So that's the sorrow. Then beyond sorrow, he says state beyond sorrow, but anyway, so beyond sorrow is which we call nirvana. That's like liberation from psychic existence. No, and so in order to achieve that is what he's saying. To seek nirvana, in order to achieve that nirvana, the state beyond sorrow. No. No. Then he says, so what do you need to do? Relinquish clinging to the three realms. When it says relinquish or give up clinging, give up attachment to the three realms, that means give up attachment to samsara or cyclic existence. No. And what he says is, if you want to abandon that kind of attachment, if you want to get rid of that kind of attachment, in other words, to cyclic existence, then what you need to do is to think about and keep in mind the drawbacks, the defects of cyclic existence. No.
Shemba Shidena la Carson, Koe Nieba, so Duba Yina, Koe Dunge Sigori, Dunge de la Rixum Yoris, Dunge Dunge, Guru Dunge, Kaba Duji Dunge Sum Yoris, or this one.
Now, as for how to reflect on the faults of cyclic existence, if you wanted to do that in a lot of detail, then you only have to look at the stage of the path teachings, which talk about how to think of the faults of some cyclic existence in terms of the 4 faults. There's you'll find 6 faults to reflect on, 8 faults to reflect on. So here our author says that all of that is telling us that all of that suffering can be like summarized into 3 types. The 3 types being what we normally call the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and then compounded suffering, the pervasive compounded suffering. No.
Dungeji dunge sena ta ngana do tonjo senje do ne dungeji dunge aji chor togri ayinsena lule na ta tangwa ta pena na yinde ke kange do dungeji dunge rwa dunge dunge re tenzo ta pena soja tonjo do ne ko dungeji dunge di aji chowa tie togri rwa ngana do ta samlo tang do gamba ngado dinde ke rimba sam dungeji do chidan na me na ta lo so ba dungeji dunge re 대나는 동에 사치시도 예송의 동에 차대. 예송 동에 차대. 디토로 삼로탄 바이나 예송의 동에 간데 유메데 삼로탄이 마음만 소소 야고 마체나 예송의 지기리 예송의 제바는 동에 됐다고 용거야 그냥 책을 삼에 심라야 아니 지나다 신나데 내고야 개체모디 워터버 치고 그래서 this.
As for the first of those 3, the suffering of suffering, so this is something we need to reflect on, we need to meditate, we need to think about. And so, well, the suffering of suffering, this is something that even animals can understand because, they experience pain, they experience that kind of thing. So they know about the suffering of suffering. And, in our lives, we know about the illness, pain, and so forth, for different types of suffering that we experience. So, however, if you think in general of psychic existence, then the worst kind of suffering that can possibly be experienced is in the lower realms, 3 lower realms. No.
담당 지진 작업에서 소나 당보 동해지 동해대 예소숨지 동해이 대 레버스 삼나 티셔봉 토도 번호 샌드업메 어디 송도 와 제가 동해숨지는 당보 동해리 동해나는 다 첩치시도 예소숨지 동해리 디토랑도 삼로타나 티셔봉스네 페네 사슴라야 나다지아도지 신나지아도 우리 예소 동해디지 삼로타 바이나 수수 신나지아 요리스 엔틴데 동해디 수수 토도야 바바이나 다 수토야요 말이 샌드메스 제가 간당한도 동해 예소 동해 용구요 말이 수수 야고 마찬아 마음바나 예소도 지네 예소 데다 예소 동해 디지 용거리 비나 눌려야서 седам에바도 지차그리 예소디 송가.
No. And if you look at verse 15, you'll see what he says about this. He says, first is the suffering of suffering. This includes the suffering of 3 lower realms. If you contemplate these well, then fear will arise. So even thinking about that kind of suffering makes you feel afraid. And then what he says, if they actually ripen on you, they are indeed unbearable. What he means is that, okay, so just thinking about them is makes you feel afraid. Then beyond that, if you don't practice well, if you don't do well, then it's actually going to happen to you. It's not just something you think about, something that's actually going to happen to you. And if it does, then you'll find it really unbearable. No.
디샴젤라 포에 개완 미주퍼 예송기 소놈 체체고 대강남도자 텔레레스다 제가 예송숨지 동해 유양 주디 미개와라 미개와레 아니 미개와데 파 뽀야게 탑시 마쳐봐 아니 미고와 두디게나 아니 예소송 중에디 용거리스 근데 진요 바이나타 셈교와라 사소로지 이 강나도 좀 틀리리사 와 근데 중에 진양고는 셈교리스 어디 송요
Dikyobores sombrada because the terele said it, right? No. So then, okay, these 3 lines of verse 16, not gathering the virtuous karma that overcomes these and continuing to cultivate the fields of the lower realms, wherever such conduct exists, spit on it, it says, in the English anyway, telele. So what this means is the cause of that suffering is non-virtue. So now you don't give up those causes, you don't give up the non-virtue, which is the cause of that, and you continue to engage in it, then that's going to happen to you. And so like spit on it, I mean, as it says in the English, what it means is that this is like something really very poor. No. And so what this is telling us is we need to avoid the 10 non-virtues which are the cause of that suffering, and instead practice the 10 virtues which are their opposites. No. After that, there's an explanation of the suffering of change. What he talks about in the following lines is the way in which things can change. So, we talk about the suffering of change. So how things can change is right now, we are human beings. So we have this birth as, a birth of high status. Birth of high status means birth as a human being or a god, right? So we have that now, but this can change. Even those who are right now gods, they can after that life is over, they can fall and be born in the lower realms. Now, even Indra, so it mentions here, doesn't it, in verse 17, I think, yeah, the god Indra can be born as an ordinary being. So Indra is the lord of gods, but on dying can take birth as quite an ordinary person, quite an ordinary being. And then even people that have clairvoyant powers now, they can die, they can lose all that and be born in the lower realms. And what it says about the sun and moon can turn into darkness. Actually, it should really, what it means is the sun and moon can go into darkness, because actually here you need to keep in mind that when we talk about the sun and the moon, these actually are the names of gods. And what we point up to and say that's the sun, that's the moon, according to this sort of I don't know, like classical sort of way of looking at things, that would be their palace. So just to give you an idea, so that's what it's talking about, is those gods, which are called the sun and the moon. They can, which are responsible for so much light in our lives. When they die, they can be born in a place of utter darkness.
이거는 규제 트렌드 깨와요. 이 농업 때문에 이 지가 패배 떠버린 민회배. 규제에서 콜로지에 잡고 콜로지에 잡고 지나야 타마 아니 양 요아치니 이미 트렌드 나 요거 된게 깨와래 봐. 갑질을 잡을 깨와래 봐. 갑질을 요아치 레기 왕게 요아치니 요거 된게 깨와래 봐. 트렌드 깨와인 거지. 좋아. 규제 트렌드 깨와인 거지. 다 진짜게 내다한테 뻔나 하이 둘을 하려 징해지 망에 손에 깨와 요바다. 내가 난시 해용 뭐 자지 근데 담매부터 깨와 요바다. 콜로지에 잡고 전부 깨와 요바디. 다 딩한테 미 통이 된데 연구 말때 좀 된데지 롱나 때네다. 이시기 롱나 때네 디게디 시기리 이네 미 패바치기 내주 디게 또 두고 말이스. 어디서 패배 또 버리 미메베.
Now, let's see. Yeah, so these there's the last one that's mentioned. The universal monarch can be reborn as a servant. So those great kings, Chakravartin kings, when they die, they can be born as it's a very menial, very low servant. So these are things, like knowing that, like gods being born in the lower realms, Indra becoming an ordinary person, the wheel-turning king, Chakravartin king becoming a servant. These are things that we can't see. Ordinary people are not able to actually realize this. It's something that we can only know through the Buddha's scriptures.
이게 농제. 다 대만인 방안도 미국 통치를 이어받이. 그러나 진짜게 교화지가 상호 땅 바이나 안다 비송나라 라나 미 교화트 미 추고 땅보 도인도 라나 미 교. 다 대대가도 그러나 콜로지에 잡아서 하다가도 다 미국 통하도 나 하용 뭐지 통교요 말때 단다값 소바방 나라도 미치도 디나라 정물링 디나 미치도게 다대 내가 미 교화도 간데도 띵한테 통고도 와서 미 따다 하고도 와서 그러나 미치고 쉬우지 이나야 가만 장고 차거든 나도 미 통주수 요로 와서 미치고 장고 도인도 나는 교화도 미치고 장고도 와서
No. So he says a rich man turns into a poor man, a confident man changes into an anxious one. So what he's saying is that, yeah, I mean, the wheel-turning king, wheel-turning monarch becoming, a servant, Indra becoming an ordinary being, and so on. These are things that we can't see. But what he's saying is just look amongst your fellow human beings, and you can see this kind of change happening. So the one he mentions is you can be very, very rich at one point in your life, then you turn into a pauper. This is something that we can see, isn't it? See it happening. No.
그냥 카차고 시물 도인도 와 카차고 시물도 카차고 해야지 미왕당 친구들이 와 갑질은 미디 왕당 친구 시우 왕 친구 시우 차가지고 양고 니마지 교화진 왕자 그렇게 명예들이 차도 와 그러나 나 제가 그 신진다들이 차베 걸고 왕 친구 시우 갑질은 교화도 그 신진도 왕자 그렇게 명예들이 차가 주주들이 이거 진짜 미 교화들이 이것도 와
Then he says a confident person changes into an anxious one. So this is talking about how somebody can be very powerful and then things change and they have no power at all. Like, we have presidents who are very powerful. Then when they're no longer president, then they're not powerful anymore. No.
미망보 찍도 줘야 돼. 갑질은 미망보 시우지 저 친구 시우지 여봐지라 야 니만 찍어 꼭 개개면 미치고 지상한치나 그는 미단지나 미망고 시우지 여바이나 미망고 뒤에 되고 깜찍은 프랑스 김도 가고 시우지 미망고 타마도디야 깜찍은 교와치면 미치고 찍잖아 하대하게 주주들의 인구도 왔어.
And where it says here, many people unite into one, it would probably be better to say many people become one, because what this is talking about is, there can be times when there are a large number of people, like in a family. Okay, so lots and lots of family there, looking very happy together. Then things change, and there's just there might be just one left. Everybody else is gone. No.
텔라소바 사미죠. 다 딘데기네 주망고 당도 담블링나 따데기나 미치조나 조시우 저거이바 딘데기 먼저 다 통질을 요리스 봐. 너도 다 이제 조와 교회 동해지 와 교회 동해지 차대요리스.
So all those situations where things change so much, these are all instances of the suffering of change. No.
다 디네 동해 숨바디 숨고리 뒤지지 동해 삼잖아 제외를 심바메스 다 동해 숨전안에 잡아 뒤지지 동해디 마디시 중거 그마.
No. Then we have an explanation of the third of the three types of suffering, which is called compounded suffering, or he actually calls it suffering of conditioning. So that's okay. Suffering of conditioning. No.
남주 소야라 동해 숨진나네 나도 못쳐야라 동해지 동해서 나도 못쳐야 내라고 책이요래 주에 동해지 또랑 나도 삼로 땅 바이나 대양 배지 못쳐 둬야지 뭐 써야지 응고요래 다 숨기는 잡아두지 동해서 해야지 뭐 써야라 남주 깔래 갖고 요래 내라고 정말 송크고 말이 어디 숨고요.
Usually it's said that the suffering is quite easy to identify. And the suffering of change, if you think about it, you can understand that. The one which is the most difficult of these three is the third, which we call the pervasive suffering of conditioning, or simply the suffering of conditioning. No.
미마야도나 뉴야도 노르추장도나 또장도 다 딘데게 뒤지지 동에도 껍질라 팀장질라 미망고 요바체 미망고 유럽깔라 아야 고 미망고 유데서만 팀장 미용용 되게 미망고들 따지 김도 가보다 양도 고시 통고할 때야 미망고 용에 될 미마치 미직세 니세야 마 간다라 카톨리 이니야 강의직 책이요. 미마양 독재. 다 용양 독재야. 용용 김자 미용용 독재야. 미망고 차베까라 야 강의직 차용요. 어떤 데게 내단도 쓰고요.
몽부 여도 아니 뉴뉴 따도 아니 더 디기도 가보 통네. 되네.
미마양 독라. 당고 미망고 되나 김도 가보죠. 제 얘네 디 강의직 망차베 강의직 원에 얘네 콘도 강의직 동의직 용도요.
네.
미마양 독세.
No.
야 용양 독세는 양 김도 미용용지나 야 용용 이베깔라 아니 담 가소래 담 미망고 주로 지나 300에 300돈이야 강의직 용도요. 와 미마양 독라 용양 독세야 되더래.
No. Where it says, where is it? You suffer. Yeah, it must be this one. You suffer with too much. You suffer with too little. So what this is talking about? Yeah, many people. Yes, that was that one. So you can have a situation where there are lots of people congregated together, like again in a family. Lots of extended family, lots of family members together. But they have their problems. They have the problems of having so many, and they're thinking of the smaller families and thinking how nice it must be to just have a smaller family. But then the smaller family also, they have their own difficulties, and they'll be looking at the the families with more members and thinking, oh, that must be nice. So they both have their problems. No.
다 간다 노르축 장도라 또 장도 와
No.
다야 노르 소소 주는 롱주 아니 축구 용야 제도 아니야 가 자지를 마무체 자지 마무체 그거와 딘제 체외 킹이 아니야 딘제게 킹이 체네 딱 강해지 체디고 그래서 노르축 장도라 야 또장 다 정부 차바에는 정부 체외 가고야 강해지 그래서 다 돈도 내가 이게들 14부 3로 땅 바이나 강행의 정신 장장지 있어 있어
And then you suffer you suffer if rich, you suffer if starved. So in other words, when we work so hard to acquire wealth, and so acquiring wealth is difficult, and then when you have the wealth, it's you have problems, and then the people that lacking in wealth also they have their problems. So if you think well about it, then you can see that either way, you've got nothing but suffering, really. No.
강다라 디 기제 도도디 샴제 미지 탐제 잡라세 잡제베 촐라 탐지 치 시야 잡라 심바메 야 강다 딘디 장장 미징안에 축부면은 축부 차야 제도 저디 장장 제 되게는 미지 조진 로야 와 딘디제 아니 디레 참 미장 김장 민용유지나 미망보야 주대 약간의 망보 저디 잡지 되게는 미지 조진 시야게 좀 레데바 어떤 딘디 저디 장장 안에 아니 잡제베 촐라 탐지 치 미지 탐제 잡라세 스드서마 미지 강가 딱 저디 장장 제마탄데 되니 뭐야지 미지 조도야지 당 저디 지기는 담아 10에 좀 레야지 이제 차두고 this one.
Then it goes on to say, we waste our entire lives in preparations. While in preparation, we will die. So what this is saying is, people spend their whole lives making preparations to become rich, trying to become rich, and then die in the attempt, die while they're in the process of trying to become rich. Then people who are in a small family, they spend their whole life trying to build up a big family, and then they die in the midst of that. So it's like we spend our lives, trying to, making arrangements, making preparations, and then we die while making preparations and while making arrangements for this and that. No.
그 동의지 풍보라 시험을 제는 틀리리 딱 간다 진짜 미팅안에 아니 그 동의랑 시기 풍보 되라 아니 차제 아니 로스체는 밑에 도주고 다디 심조버리스 actually.
And then he goes on to say, so even in death there is no end to the preparations, for we begin preparations for the next life. Spit on those who continue to cling to this mass of suffering called psychic existence. So obviously he's understood this phrase terele differently as spitting on, but what it means is so thinking in this way, you see that the whole of psychic existence is in the nature of suffering. So being attached to it is really quite pathetic or quite poor. No.
디인다 딱코 검수 코와를 심배 심바다 방소나 아니 냥안에 대바 토바리스 냥데 코와 토바리 냥데 토나 아니 땡기 대와 토비요리스 어디서
He says when freed of this clinging, so this is in verse 22, third line, when freed of this clinging you go beyond sorrow, when gone beyond sorrow you attain happiness. What this means is that if you can overcome your attachment to cyclic existence, then you'll be able to achieve nirvana. And if you achieve nirvana, then you will have achieved lasting happiness. No.
어디리 나디 인도 양한테나도 셴바 니틸 수도 셴바 시틸 셴바 니틸 냠기양다 셴바 당보 제들라시는 처바미 미사다 셴바 니바 코발시는 예주 민사 이 안도 셰심바
Then it says freedom from those two clingings is the experience of expanse. So what this means is that up until now, then we've been looking at the first two lines. In other words, how to overcome attachment to this life and attachment to the cyclic existence. No.
삼륜나는 냠내 집에가 당보 시간 당보기 냠내디 응원을 친 와. 세들라시네 초반에서 겨와치마 편지가 삼로 땅하기 토베 겨와치마 편지가 삼로 땅니 아니 파드미 고마도야 저 추름 송아 겨바쳐봐 삼바쳐봐 고마쳐봐 냠내디 네 담어제 니네세디 야고 차소나 아 아니 검소 고알의 신배 신바방야가 제도 냠내 가서 시간 200 냠내들라 주고고 그 방링 제발이나 와 당보들 삼을지 마담발 니발을 남살하고 지야서로 니 유야 깔래 가버려 셈을 조단 깔래 가버려
And so you have those first two lines. If there's attachment to this life, it's not Dharma. If there's attachment to samsara, there's no renunciation. So you do definitely need to focus on the practices associated to the first line. Otherwise, if you go straight into the second line, trying to overcome attachment to samsara without having worked with the overcoming attachment to this life, then it's going to be quite difficult. So for that reason, you have the idea that you're going to try that rather than being attached to this life, then practice morality as a foundation, and then on the base of that foundation, then you engage in listening, reflecting, and meditation. No. Now then, the third of the four lines, which says, if there is attachment to your own welfare, then you're not a bodhisattva. No.
냥을 대바 또 소소라니 코알라 타야치도 삼로치 레버와 레버레 디 삼로 주와데 간다진 삼로 땅니 네체야 삼로 네체야 두두 토르 두두 삼바 땅 아치고 코알라 타베 펜도 개민도 다치고 타베 펜주메 검순 심제 파마이 파마 동에지 셉도샤 단 데버도바 텔레레 와딱 제당 아치고 코알라 타베게 pen keke mindu ini ngala ini pege kading gi jange kamsum ji simje tan ji susu phamata bu cha de yo this wa dinza phama dije de pege kange na dungye na sha che ini susu chibu ini ngazo ma tan ko ala tawam tirsa chi lo do do ba na di sim to bo this di samlo tan da samlo to bo ri sha sabe na samlo ne che de ya do chi chi mo
So before we were sort of thinking about our own personal liberation, but now here it's talking about somehow the one's way of thinking improving, evolving. So what that means is you think to yourself, well, just me achieving liberation. There's no real particular benefit in that because there are all of the sentient beings of the three realms of psychic existence who are all my very kind mothers and fathers, and so it would be really quite poor and quite awful to just think of my own liberation and leave them suffering. No.
What is it? Then Nishamja comes from you doing Dalami, Dagi Sonam Simjinkiri, Sonam D, Chilaji, Simjetam Sanjisho, study 동랭이 삼로 와 다 간다르 파마 감송이 심제든지 수수 파마 제모뉴가 제요마 디소소 거진 침보리 디소탄에 감송이 심제 탐제게 농에 디게 강았다 소소랑 일은 용화쇼 말 니에던도 용화쇼 니 니에게 소남단 대화 강요바디 시행을 봐 kit민바쇼 선배 삼로단 나게 소노 심제게 다 딘데기 니 동네 삼로단에게 니 소남 디기 누발라 때네 심제 탐제 산지지 공부 타바쇼 선 니 셴뱅기 삼로도 쉽침부 진대요
No. Then verse 24 says, may the suffering of the three realms ripen upon me. May sentient beings take away all my merit. Through the blessings of this meritorious act, may all sentient beings become fully enlightened. And so what this means is thinking about the way in which all sentient beings have been so kind. They're all one's fathers and mothers, and they're all so kind. Then we think, may all their suffering ripen on me. May I experience all their suffering. May my happiness ripen on them. So, may they have my happiness. And due to the merit of having practiced in this way, which means practicing taking and giving, Tonglen, through the merit of having practiced in this way, may all sentient beings become fully enlightened. No.
어디 단다 람조 전에 장섬이 심기 람조 넘소는 심기 봐 심기 먼저 람조 넘소는 심기 거 송유어리 다시 시간이 봐 되게 람조 넘소는 연중 거도 조차로 와 지금 와다 전에 시간 셴바 시대의 시간 숨바 되게 람조 넘소는 안에 심기리 아니 기부 충딩이 나네 기부 첨벽 삼로리 다시 시간이 봐 기부 딩기 삼로리
No, let it.
시간 200개 삼로 단다디 기부 딩기 삼로 단다디 단다 시간 순배 삼로 단다디 기부 침벽 삼로 단다디 먼저 기부 충동이 냠내 돈을 삼로 단바이나 기부 침벽 삼로 단다 내가 는시 냠에 답을 지금 뭐람 시나네 시간 200개 삼로 단다디 출람도 좋아서야 돼 출람도 좋아 시간 순배 삼로 단다디 람나 발제 매봤어야 이제 자도 제가 그게 이게 다 공부 초강가 튀버도 책을 봐.
No.
남조리 기부 충딩 삼로리 다 이게 되고.
No. Okay, so now if we compare this with the three principal paths of Gyümé Lama Tsongkhapa, so the second one for him is bodhicitta. So this is talking about when we talk about the third of the parting from the four attachments, the third one, then that is equivalent to Lama Tsongkhapa's bodhicitta. And in terms of the stage of the path, then so you have small, middling, and great. Anyway, so it's equivalent to the person of great capability those practices. And in fact, going back to the previous two, the first two of the four, that about attachment to this life and attachment to samsara. So those are equivalent to Lama Tsongkhapa's renunciation out of his three principal paths, and they are equivalent to the small and middling stage of the practices in common with the person of small and middling capability. And so then in terms of the Gampopa's four prayers, so that's, so the second one, the prayer for one's Dharma to become the path, and then the third one for there to be no obstacles on the path. They do all seem to kind of like fit together very well. They're all sort of like going in a similar direction. No.
이제 다 시간 시와 지마추나 따와미스야들이 이꼴마시.
Now we go on to the fourth one, which is if there is grasping, then it's not the view. No.
단대디는 다 제대로 두장 최진아 진짜 제일 좋아하면서 다 간다 나랑도 다 능기 요리 다 남아나신 대가랑 게 안에 능수들 주버 짐바테 취지 당지당 강사가 당지 책이 요리 좋아 인자 취지 당지다 강사가 당지 제바 이나 검수 코알에 줘두고 말이스.
Okay, so what this, how this is explained, or how he explains this is, so we have the appearance of a self, and if we grasp at that self as existing in the way that it appears, then that means that we have, grasping at the, well, actually, when it says self, and it's not just the person, so you have two types of grasping at self-existence, grasping at the self of the person, and grasping at a self of phenomena, which means phenomena other than the person. And so long as you have those, either of those two, grasping a self of the person or a phenomena, then there's no way that you're going to be able to achieve liberation. No.
디 정도도 군디고 거들이 대한 십도 시했잖아. 여버진라 타바메 메바진라 투리미 여버진 바스는 다 메발라 간사가 다 취지 다 메발라 여버진 바티나 여버진 바이나 이 진바데 마바 바도 아니 타바토야요 말이스 여버진라 타바메 와 메버진라 투리메스는 야 메버진 바데 군디기 따와 페나 교황같이 매봤다와다 레준데 매봤는데 따왔는데 진대바는 아니 교와치 몽도 하드미 콤바토야 돼 이거 말이스 어디서가.
He then goes on to talk about exaggeration, and then also good denial. So in the case of exaggeration, so as long as you have the exaggeration, then there's no way of achieving liberation. And then when you have exaggeration, in other words, grasping at things as existing, truly. And then as long as there's denial, which means like in a sense grasping at non-existence, in other words, thinking that something which actually does exist doesn't exist at all, then there's even no chance of gaining a good life as a human being. Or as a god, in other words, birth of high status. So the kind of thing that's talking about is thinking that there's no past and future lives. There's no karma and its results. Then you couldn't even get a birth as a human being or as a god. No.
네가 짐바 미시바 님이 경알라 랑가르쇼다. 네가 짐바도 여버짐베 따다 여버짐베게 따다다 매버짐베게 체단이다 체네 아니 딩이 타 딩이다 체베 아니 니미경아 타 우메람기 스네면도 딘데경아 아니 냠버 샤고 그리스다 심지경아 샤고 그리스.
So then he goes on to say, so there is no liberation. This is what we already just looked at. There's no liberation for those who grasp at existence. There's no higher rebirth for those who grasp at non-existence, and those who grasp at both are ignorant. So place your mind freely in the non-dual sphere. What this is saying is that since there are those drawbacks to grasping at existence, in other words, true existence, and grasping at non-existence, which means total non-existence of cause and its karma and its results and so forth, then instead dwell in or place your mind in meditation on non-duality, which means the middle way free of the two extremes being the eternalist extreme, which is like the extreme of existence, and then the nihilist extreme, which is the same as the grasping at non-existence. No.
죽은 심지 주인 다 디스도 근데인자 저 탐제 법에 따름 레스고다.
Okay, so then he says, all things are but objects of the mind. So this is verse 27, right? All things are but objects of the mind. And what this is talking about is the way in which all phenomena are mere imputations from the side of the conceptual mind. No.
안디와데 차도 원주 라소바 중시 지게 맞춰봐라 심리게 나라 강가르쇼 다디스통도와 다디 디 애니야 나라도 지댕게 롱주 류롱주 강가 아니 치료벽에다 제번 원주게 제바보 봐 진짜 많이 봐 아니 그런 랑기 주대 建了 때문에 중요하게 나라 수수기 교황하면 레사다다 진짜 때문에 중국유벽에 계시 시기 왔대.
He goes on and to say all things are but objects of the mind. Okay, that's one we just read. Without searching for a creator of the four elements, such as a wise diviner, Ishvara, and so forth, place the mind freely in the sphere of mind itself. So here he's talking about the idea that there is a creator of, there's a creator that creates all of us and the whole world and so forth. So he says, he advised us to reject that view and understand that actually all of this is merely the result of the causes that we've created in previous lives. No.
디나 근데 딜을 차차는 디나 디도 나도 중요하리 디퍼게 신다지게 수요체는 마치고 나도 디도 잡아서 디네 많이 봐 라랑 수수 교황하면 레 사모당 녀바 사발라 때니 set들 디도 나도 용하디 심리 정한을 조사도 된다 되다.
So where it says place the mind freely in the sphere of what's that say? Place the mind freely in the sphere of mind itself. Yeah, that's okay. So in that verse, what he's talking about is place the mind in the understanding that the happiness and suffering that we experience in this life isn't caused by others, but rather is the result of our own karma. In other words, our own deeds in previous lives.
나와 Gyümé 런시다 땡지 제바 중앙에 내로 줘버 메시지 주제정하라 강가를 쇼스 다디 딱 삼로 땅다데 다징한도 따지지 타니다 저 우면랑 토라 삼로 땅거리 숨겨요 이 우면랑지 토라 삼로 땅다디 최탐제 도배 따좀 인당다 디토라 삼로 땅다 숨겨 라나 칸나와디 Gyümé 런시 제레스 나와디 따도 뎀바 마디 나와 Gyümé 런시 이래.
Then when it says the illusory nature of all appearances and the truth of dependent arising as well, one cannot describe their true mode of being, so place the mind freely in the ineffable sphere. So this is talking about the middle way, abiding in the middle way, free of those two extremes, and understanding that whatever appears to us is actually just like an illusion. No. What this is saying is that nothing, everything is like an illusion, not existing truly as it appears. Why is it that things don't exist truly as they appear? Is because everything is dependent arising. No. La, conda.
Masam Gyümé sa kije dishigwa odinashi taji tani da umen lam tela samlo tani tinga simsi june ne gogoris otisu.
So place the mind freely in the ineffable sphere means place your mind in that awareness of the of phenomena being free of the those two extremes of true existence and total non-existence. So place your mind in that emptiness, free of those two extremes. No.
디 양도 디기 아니 시간 시바 조타버 시간 시바 가령 왔단다 참말 지나 따와면 해야지 봐 다도 주가 지나 따와 말이 다도 좀 요 말이 인디 뽕와데 단 주메랑 시기 삼로 땅에 아니 우면람들 삼땅 고리스 시간 시바디 제시 도
And that is an explanation of the fourth of the four lines, which says if there's grasping at signs, then there's no, then it's not the view. It's not the so it's not the view. Yeah. So what this means, what this is explaining is that in order to not have this grasping at signs, then think that nothing exists. Nothing is self-existent. Everything is the middle way and is just like an illusion. No.
지금 시바디 남존남손하네 아니 양다베 따와서야들이 이와 멸럼 시나네 추바 이시수 차와 추바디 추지단지데 강사단지샤 디파 데다 제니 아니 이시수 차와서네 동만이 또베 이시수 차와 쇼스 추바 이시수 차와서 멸럼 시바디다 이제 지금 시바디다 아니 기부 충지 침보선에 기부 침별 남나 주니 게세제 쩌발라라네 에네 데네바 시라게 바르도 침발라라베 기자리 와 어디스
No. So this fourth practice, the practices like that are implied by this fourth line. If there's grasping at signs, then it's not the view. This is equivalent in the three principal paths to the third one, which is the correct view. So Lama Tsongkhapa's text, the correct view. Then in the four prayers of Gampopa, it matches up with the fourth prayer, which is a prayer for the mistake to become exalted wisdom or sublime wisdom, profound wisdom. So that profound wisdom anyway refers to the wisdom realizing emptiness. And then as far as the stages of the path are concerned, so in the stage of the path of the person of great capability, you have the practice of the six perfections, which includes the perfection of wisdom. So this belongs there, or it's equivalent to that. No.
아디 인더지 셴바시 시에타네 주도 개왕 와들이 셴바시데 셰바이 개와디 소놈지 로와 둠보 마리와 산제설로 고바시 따다나 가랑도 페나 지준 잡아 전세계 오면은 비경교리 가랑도 이나야 가사다 드리니 니마니리랑 또 셴바시데 콜이야 계제 셰바리 디셰베 게베타바 딜라 때네 로와 듀 탐제 로와 둠보 탐제 인 산제지 공부 뉴도 저기 주조와 쇼스
Then he Gyatsen Gyatsen finishes with his own dedication. Verse 29, he says, through the merit derived from this virtue of presenting, parting from the four clingings, may all beings of the seven classes or seven types, without exception, be led to the ground of Buddhahood. So that's his prayer, and we can make the same prayer, that because of all of the the positive karma, merit, and so forth that we've created during these 2 days, last night, listening to the explanation, and then also this evening, that we can dedicate it in the same way. No. No.
하들라 레벨 하체 수질 하체 수밀 하숨체 네가 미견이 로든 지단 수단 지요 와 네숨숨체 아니 하체 레벨 하여와 레벨 하체 수질 하 수밀 하 네가 미견이 로든 강가 다 상지 공방유도 주도와 쇼서 있습니다.
When it says 7 there, well, how we can understand that is it's referring to the 3 lower realms. So there's 3. Then human beings, that makes 4. And then the 3 levels of God, which are the desire realm gods, form realm gods, and formless realm gods. So those, that makes 7. No.
At the end of the Shemba City, ordering other gender Mason discovery. Any that Chuju the Tiranzo Chuju Simpson, Chinzola, Tuju Kame, Tiranzo Kame Kamiduna, was a Tiwatil, Kamachucho and Chene degree.
No.
Yan Tiranzo Tuju Kame, any Tirin Tamshania, Tiwatil, the Tiranzo, Stivlia, Messestana, any answering and Yeg land, the Macalicali, was a Chene degree.
No. So that finishes the class, our class that we've had now on the topic of parting from the 4 attachments. And at this point now, if it's okay for you guys time-wise, then we can have maybe 10 minutes or so of questions. And if it's a little bit difficult for you time-wise, then maybe any questions you have, you can get to me, that's Steve, somewhere in the ether, and then I'll get those questions to Khensur Rinpoche, and we can get the answers to you. Okay. Do we have time then? Come choose chungas trawachi that the Jordan nana de tata residula.
Koran to Kalia Makana, Nala Chevaki Mendu, any Chuating, Tunda Nimbo, Manzo Kijan, Kesa Tirin Kijan, Karjo, somebody that Chun Yahu Chiguris, that Kiwachima Pinjak, some lotani, Chuyahu Chiguris, Chiguris, Tunda Kijan, Dishigo, Chuyahu Chiguris, that under Miss Sango, Miss Seba Sango, or that under.
Really, the essence of what I've been talking about over these 2 days is that it's really important to practice Dharma in order to make sure that we have a good future after this life. And equally, the essence, the real heart of what I've been talking about is that we need to be kind. We need kindness. We need a kind heart, good heart.
Remember, and Chidan, Paju, the Shimi, the Jawalian, want to think of the terror. The Insultan, Chesan, Taba, the Tamji Chamber, Kitchen Shiguri, indeed, Tobala, meet there somewhat indeed, Guni, Gulam, Diton, any Rogo Mando, Chidan Shimi, that indeed, Tenji, then Taba, the Tamji Chamber, 2 said, Kogo, Yukora, Yoma. Tinta, Jawachima, Hadam, Mida, meet there somewhat in the Toya Chita.
Now, we're talking about having question and answer together, right? Well, that can only happen because we have the capacity to speak and understand the meaning. If we were a cat or a dog, we wouldn't have that kind of opportunity. We just wouldn't be able to do that. So we talk about achieving liberation and enlightenment. Well, in order to do that, you really do need to be a human being. I mean, human being or a god. It's no good being a dog or a cat. If you're a dog or a cat, you're not going to be able to follow the path to liberation and enlightenment. So that's, for that reason, we need to be careful in following the ethical discipline, as it says in this text, morality. No.
Any that shouldn't so the catching is what that did it.
So what I'm saying is you know, if you want to achieve liberation and enlightenment, you need to be a human being. You need to be a human being, you know, in life after life. And if you have a strong wish to do that, well, what you need is the practice of morality.
Okay. That one near church down that any
No. So how about a question then? Somebody have a question?
We have one. What is the grasping of the self of phenomena, please?
Chögi dance in the Karela. Chögi dance.
Chögi dance. Kansa dancing said, Chögi dance said, New York. The dancing you chabar de Miguel chabar to God. Miguel Kansa Chila, Kansa Penal Heji, Chujin, Sura Kansa Chila, Mini, he dado to what this sooner. Kansa dancing said, Chago. Miguel Kansa Mini. That Kansa Maim be chu, around the Pumbu. Pumbu in a Pumbu Miguel Chene and dado to what Zimba. Yana di Maimbe, Chiloge, Rijawa, Pena Pumbata, Kawata, what Tindel Miguel Chene, dado to what Zinsuna, the Chuji down the chapel.
So there are actually two types of grasping at a self, grasping at things as it, you know, being truly existing or existing from their own side. There's the grasping at the self of the person and grasping at the self of phenomena. So sometimes we call them self-grasping of the person, self-grasping of phenomena. So as for self-grasping of the person, so the difference between these is in terms of the object that they're grasping as having true existence from its own side. So what that means is that when you're thinking about a person, it could be, you know, Jack, John, whoever, you know, and you're thinking that this person is truly existent, exists as a self, exists from their own side. That would be self-grasping of the person. When your mind turns to something other than the person, so when it says self-grasping of phenomena, phenomena means like anything which exists, right? So anything which exists other than the person, it could be your own body and mind aggregates. It could be, you know, that would be like an inner object, external objects like mountains and houses and so on. When you refer to them and grasp them as existing from their own side, being truly existent, that's what we would call self-grasping of phenomena. No.
Yeah, thank you, Mushisha, Chidesamba, Kansa Dante, the Chuji Dante Sadi, Chava to the Mipa Korangani, Chabash Dugu or Mado, Loyokoni Chava Dugu or Mare. That Chunda Oma, Ranjuba, Dindia Menchela Yaya, Danzini Chavati, Mibe Kone Mayimba, Zimba Korang when Zindang Kone any Chavashatan Chingori. That Tandang, thank you, Shisha Chidu, Mibe Kone Chavashako this.
And so there are different philosophical systems within Buddhism with different ideas about this. So the one that's, you know, the very top one is the Prasangika system. And they're the ones that say that the difference between these two types of grasping at a self is in terms of the object that they're referring to, not in terms at all of the way in which the mind is like engaging in the object. The lower schools, so Swatantrika downwards, they say the difference is not in terms of the object, but in terms of the way that the mind is engaging in the object. So since we follow the Prasangika system, so we would say the difference between these two is in terms of the object that's being referred to.
There's another question from Tenzin Shutup. Could Geshe Wangdu Rinpoche Allah please elaborate on why a meditator can be lost in empty chatter and distractions when they meditate for this life's sake? Thank you, Kyabsuche.
Tenzin share singing jiki genal dishugi dos tadi takanda tadi sedi chedu ani de gomsongna ani kasa tadi kasa tadi keje mamu shiki res tadi sidi ngegi mendwa chezanda CJ Chusumbre. She the kind of did chick do the chick Diwala any the Duzi chick do. Sedi Chedu and the Gomna and Redde. The Tambo did like the Duzi chick do. And Banana the Duzi the Legres and Diwala and the custard the long time Mawe Kadun chance. Sugdo 지정에 did just or did it long tam mawe kadun gens 직 송도 did the 직 송nas Canada the say did chibugi chedu gomgamna any long tam mawe kadun chen kadis 용기요nas 직 송nas
다 지지고지도 곰잡에 크위첸 다 곰문에 맞아왔지 디시고 다 곰문에 맞아왔지 아니 곰잡에 크위첸 아니 디와 야 가르소래 대매게 깨져시네 대 롱담마 왔으나 전담에 깨져시니 대바디시고라 롱담마에 어디 진짜 차도 그리 semgi dingne gom ya gochi ya samlo me bache mi tawdisono gom jagi we number tawache jandala ani ya choni kejeshen deba de india cha to is
So the thing is, when it says for the sake of this life, it means you're not really meditating. You're kind of putting on a show of meditating, kind of like a facade. So, it looks to other people like you're meditating, but you're not really meditating. And then, then you just, Khensur said when he was explaining it, it's like during your break, then you'll just be hanging out with people engaged in meaningless chatter.
tanda dinala shindere muchige dinala ya londam maye any karsore tanda di londam maye kandu jinsa chorwa
No.
이거 가르쳐 수수 루부디 네 엠바지라 데베 쿠이체나 양 서와
No.
루 네 엠바 데베 쿠이체나 양 미션다 그거라 제슈섬에 다 자차고 제슈섬에 랑게 삼바 타고니 곰잠되며 봐 심기 딩니 곰잠되며 봐 어루 유제라 아니 롱담지 깨져마고 시야 곰자가 버루 유제라 아니 민 탁반에 아니 곰잠되면 깨져마고 시기 말이스 민 탁반에 곰자도 미스 미 뒤에 자차고 야지데 들에 곰자는 아니 버루 유라 깨져셔야서 들에 차그리 소디스고
No. What it says in Chöden Rinpoche's commentary, which we have here, is in relation to this idea, you'll become adept in the art of empty chatter, as it says in the English. So what he says is that when we talk about somebody who's meditating for the sake of this life only, we're talking about somebody who might well be physically in an isolated place. However, really, because they have no deep wish to meditate, to speak of, they don't really want to meditate, but they're going to put on a good display of meditating in front of other people. And so then that kind of person, when there's a break, okay, so that's what they're pretending to meditate, basically, during the session, but during the break, when there's nobody, not when there's nobody around, but anyway, during the break, then they'll just sit around chatting with people. So if you really want to meditate, if your wish to meditate is a sincere one, then it would be completely different. You wouldn't get involved in all sorts of meaningless chatter with people. No. No. So I hope that explains.
现在좋아요. 되면은 좀더 깔려 가기에는 이 샤샤는 지금 이 단지 공도 쉬고는 지. 양 기랑도 3년을 때인데 니 계속 드린 시조 되는 3년을 바빠 된데도 좋아요나. 아니 스티븐의 메시지 타는 양 먼저 받은 미소설이야. 랜드 퓨처로 와. 디체나서. 공도 깔려 가고 그래서.
No. So again, if it's getting difficult for you, then, we can stop there. Otherwise, I can do, more questions. But, as I was saying, if it is difficult, then, you can get your questions to me, and then we'll, I'll be able to ask Khensur and Geshe, and we can get your questions answered gradually in that way. Okay, so where are we? Another question?
Well, there's one more question. It could be either a very long answer or very short. So if you're ready, is placing the mind in the ineffable sphere the same as Mahamudra?
Gyümé Wangdu shas chi song song ada di de tamara mare de chi song song Gyümé ying de no di ingire de 제산 de didang ani de 자기 첨부 gomse di chikberbes 자기 첨부스 dila samo di gom dindi gyabadang ani de 자기 첨부기 gom gyabdan dindi yorwala di chikber
나 단단 먼저 디케지 셔야 주미 정말 샤워에서 저번 매봤어야디 동이랑래 다 동반이 날 제주도 냐바 샤고 계제 디시고 와 단단 먼저 짐바 시바디 테마주나 따와면서 덴버주바 지소나 따와 책을 말 따와의 컨데레스나 따지 타니의 저거 우마샤치요리 디강 인셈지지도 내고를 딱 간다 동이를 삼로당에 대고를 동반이를 삼로당고를 해야지 안데 측디
No. Well, as far as this is concerned, when it says allow the mind, it talks about allowing the mind to remain in the ineffable sphere, the inexpressible sphere. So what this is actually talking about is meditating one-pointedly on emptiness. So the fourth of these, the parting from the four attachments, it says if there's grasping at signs, or if there's grasping, then it's not the view. So, well, what is the view then? So the answer to that is it's the meditation on emptiness, which is free, which emptiness, which is the middle way, free of the two extremes. No.
What did it? This one.
No, and then didang chage chenpo chikbar bela.
Chage chenpo chen namju chage tawa nala chik sunga jorwa. Ta di chage da tongni rang je tongmani kone samtang ije de sung yorwa. What did it?
And it would be the same as meditating on Mahamudra, really, because actually, Mahamudra, what does it mean? The Great Seal, it means emptiness. So this is talking about meditating on emptiness. No.
This one.
No, lare.
That and the chicken she will call a Tomani got the Madinama, Chetamja Tobe Tatum that the Decola Mabosuja in it, the total time that ships out with Geshe, the Kechuma, so Yan Jema de Wango, getting no cover some good wa.
No. No. So this, here with this fourth one, which is about the view, and in other words, is about emptiness. I didn't get to talk very much about it. Certainly didn't get really to talk in much detail about it, but I'm sure that there'll be a chance to talk more in the future.
That is one.
Also, rewa ye la.
In Tamil, which in Tanganzo. Judela, that case at the Nimani to Gangagi, it just shared the Chugotola of Dolinchi, Chugotola of Dolinchi to Soma, the Mandugi Dolinchi, that gets such 10 days, and Gawadi to la 10, any Sanji Tamba Java, any Tamba Zingi, any Kangurum Lama Sovereign Bochere, Sahanachi, any resume Sibeta, Kibutamba, where the Gekanga Kuti Sheve Tamba, and Maranzo Kangale, similar Pachaya.
Okay, so we've spent this time talking about Dharma for these last couple of days. And so definitely we have created what we call the roots of virtue, virtuous roots. So let's dedicate all that to the spreading of the Buddha's teachings and for the long lives of the holy beings everywhere, in particular His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Khensur Rinpoche, and so forth, all holy beings, and also for us to be able to get, very strong imprints of Dharma practice. No.
하트는 찍찍이라 주제샤 때문에 찍찍이라샤는 단데 내가 지금 붙여거든. 단단히 추림 어디 송고리사 지어와.
No.
그지 시에와. 다 추림 뒤념도 야로와. 추림 되게 미 고만 토기 요때 이 로바텔라 멜럼 지마메바 멜럼 뛰메바자 개침모리스. 와. 멜럼 뛰메바자 개침모리 대단념도 아니 진배 냠내다 세배 냠내 자티 이 추줌 그러고라 din이 빼면서 개침모리 멜럼 지마메바 자지다 아니 진배 진바다 세바다 아니 딘데 냠내 자티 개침모리 가래서나 추줌 되게 밀기기요 봐 추줌 되게 밀기기요리 어두스냐 디 로바는 din이 개침모치 그래 디장 좀 해봐 지금
No. One thing I wanted to say, one last thing I wanted to say, which I left out before, which is that along with the practice of morality, you need what we call stainless prayers. And not only that, but also the practice of generosity and patience. And the reason for that is that morality, it's true, it does act as the cause for you to be a human being. No.
멜럼 지마메 봤는 나 밀음 마음번에 밀을 제외 겁라 아니 최 땡갱게로 소소라 남들 중에기 라마 계획신이스면도 딘데도 채워 쇼스 와 최 요새 농거질을 겨war렌지 네 상 먼저 있는 딱 상제게 땜바데 제와 쇼스 멜럼 자 직대
When we talk about stainless prayers, what that means is that you're making prayers of dedication, that as a result of your practice of morality, that you will not just become a human being, but as a human being, you'll be in a place where you will meet with Dharma teachers. No.
밀겨war는게 근데 밀겨버려대 코로나 남든 징에게 예외신이 예외신이 맞춰봐인다 강에 찍고 왔어. 다 되는 것이 야 밀게 뭐 최유세 농발을 깨봐 얘나야 소소를 사야 동야 내매게 소외 그 강에 채봐 있는 지기요 말이 맞춰야 치도 짐바 땅야 서바 고미야 이게 냠내 치고고요. 그래서
And if you look, you can see that there are some people who they've been born as human beings, but they're in a place where they never come across Dharma at all. So they're human beings, but they have this big problem in their lives because they never meet somebody who can show them the way. And then there are others who are born in places, kind of like situation where there's huge problems with getting food and drink. So because of all this, then besides the morality and the stainless prayers, you need to practice generosity and patience. No.
대가나시 소소 니레니레나 짐바타레 대가나시 소바가 냠레디게 제바이나 이 마음 바는 온도 필숨 소바지 깨알 엔텐토그리스 미테 필숨 소바지 깨알 펜토그리스 어디sem을 샤로지.
And so that was the point I wanted to make. There are these three things: to practice pure morality, to make stainless prayers, which means prayers to be able to meet with the Dharma and to meet with teachers that explain about the Dharma. That's the second one. And then the third one, practice the accompanying that with the practice of generosity and patience. If you have a combination of those three, then you'll be able to get a really like excellent human life in the future. So we'll stop there then. So the Sajipoki, yeah, okay, we've got it. So now Christine, Christine also SBC de Okay, go ahead, Christina. Please say what you wanted to say. Can't hear you.
I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you from all of the students that have joined us here and from Land of Medicine Buddha. Thank you from the deepest parts of our hearts. We're so in gratitude for these precious teachings from you. And please return again soon and teach us over and over and over again.
Yeah, well, anyway, we can talk these things over, right? We can chat about this. Okay.
Yes, thank you. And if
Yeah.
everybody wants to say thank you at the end as well, they can unmute at the very, very end and say thank you.
So we're going to have a few final dedication prayers with our incomparable Michael putting the prayers up, and then after that, people can unmute and say hi, thank you, that kind of thing. Okay. Jambel Pao Jita Kemba Dan Gundu Zambo Dean Dejin De Teta Gungi Jesu Dalo Kyawa Dida Tamche Raptu Ngo Tusun Shepe Kyawa Tamjik Ngoa Kanla Chotu Ngabad Dagi Gewe Zawa Dikun Kyan Zambo Jeje Raptu Ngoa Egi Kanre Rawe Koroe Shingan Bendan Dewa Malu Jungwe Jenre Ziwan Denzin Gyatso Yi Shabe Site Bad Dengyuru Ji. No, no. And also the tanda the mute the off chain and kashi touch the letter which sugars. Come and okay.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Then Mary Betuga.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Nanzo casa the organic sajidal the chicken, the Mary Beth lesson.
Very good. Oh, very good. Oh, just
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh.
Mm.
인지시에도 계시에요.
걔라 터주나.
아, 가와이.
랑아 세누구스 되게야.
선대고 알래야. 그런 선대고 일년 가두신 말이야.
랑아 세누구스는데 슈칭마다 더 로드 투베 디멘스레.
오케이. 야고래. 다 보르 다 디버든 미친 도나치가 야고시다. 다 테스트 도나치고. 야. 그렇지. 그렇지. 네.
Still Rinpoche.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
bye.
Oh, dear.
Bye.
Hi, Ram.